It was a gray Friday morning in Providence. Outside, rain misted over the courthouse steps, soft and steady, the kind that makes people move slower and speak gentler. Inside Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, the day began like any other: traffic violations, parking citations, the routine rhythm of justice. But that morning was about to become something no one would ever forget. The clerk called the next case. A soft shuffle echoed from the hallway, followed by the rhythmic tap of a cane. Through the double doors walked Walter Thompson, an 80-year-old man wearing an army field jacket. Its faded patches told a story most people in that room would never live to understand. Korea, 1951. Heartbreak Ridge. Silver Star recipient. Walter's hands trembled slightly as he held a folded paper. His eyes were alert but tired, the kind of eyes that had once seen too much smoke, too much snow, too much loss. Judge Caprio noticed immediately. He always did. The way someone entered his courtroom told him more than any file ever could. "Good morning, sir," Caprio said warmly. "What's your name?" Walter cleared his throat. "Walter Thompson, Your Honor." His voice was gravel, worn down by age and cigarettes from another lifetime. Caprio nodded gently. "Mr. Thompson, you're here for failure to appear on a previous citation. Do you understand what that means?" Walter blinked at the sheet of paper. I thought I came to court already. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do." The judge leaned forward slightly. This wasn't defiance, it was confusion. "Did you receive a notice about your court date?" Walter hesitated. "Maybe. I get a lot of mail, Your Honor. My daughter usually helps me, but she's working overseas, medical mission in Kuwait." Caprio looked through the file. The original charge was minor, expired registration. But missing court automatically added a failure to appear, which could lead to jail time. He exhaled slowly. "Mr. Thompson, are you here alone today?" "Yes, sir. Took the bus from Pawtucket. Don't drive much anymore." Caprio's tone softened. "All right, Mr. Thompson. These charges are a bit more complicated than a simple ticket. You have the right to legal representation. I'm going to appoint a public defender to help you. Would that be okay?" Walter nodded in relief. "Yes, Your Honor." "Thank you. I never understood all this legal talk." The judge gestured to his bailiff. "Please see if a public defender is available." 5 minutes later, the courtroom doors opened again. A young attorney strode in, Damon Price, mid-30s, crisp navy suit, polished shoes, phone in hand. Confidence radiated off him like cologne. "Counselor Price," the clerk announced, "appointed to represent Mr. Walter Thompson." Price gave a curt nod and approached the podium. Caprio explained the situation, concluding with deliberate emphasis. "Mr. Thompson is a Korean War veteran. He's confused about the paperwork. Please assist him." Price glanced sideways at the old man beside him, eyebrows arching slightly, amusement more than empathy. "So," Price began, flipping through the file, "Mr. Thompson, you forgot your court date?" Walter adjusted his glasses. "I thought it was next week." "I was at the VA hospital, sir." Price chuckled under his breath. "Right. The VA. Of course." He looked up, smirking. "You know, even at your age, calendars still work the same way." Caprio's pen froze above his notes. He looked up slowly. Walter's eyes dropped. "I'm sorry, sir. Price waved him off. "Don't worry, we'll try to keep things simple." "Ever used a computer before, Mr. Thompson?" "No, sir. My daughter handles most." Right, Price interrupted. "Guess the internet came a little late for you folks." Caprio's jaw tightened. He didn't interrupt yet. Price continued flipping pages. "So, an expired registration, failure to appear, we're not exactly dealing with Watergate here." He laughed quietly at his own joke. Walter didn't. The silence that followed was heavy. Caprio leaned forward. "Counselor Price," he said, voice calm but edged with warning, "Mr. Thompson is your client. I expect you to treat him with respect." Price shrugged lightly. "Of course, Your Honor. Just trying to get a sense of his mental capacity. He seems a little foggy." The judge's gaze sharpened. "That's enough." Price smirked again, not catching the temperature in the room. He turned back toward Walter. "Mr. Thompson, here's what's going to happen. The judge will probably fine you unless you forget that too." He smiled. Walter's lips pressed together. He stared at the table. His knuckles turned white around the cane. That was the moment Judge Caprio's patience ended. "Counselor Price," Caprio said, voice low but commanding, "approach the bench." Price walked over, still confident, still unaware of the storm forming in front of him. "Yes, Your Honor?" Caprio's tone was deliberate. "In my 37 years on this bench, I've never seen an attorney speak to a client that way. You will address him with the dignity he deserves, or you will leave this courtroom." Price raised an eyebrow. "Your Honor, I think you're overreacting. I was simply clarifying." "Stop talking." The two words cracked like a gavel strike. Price froze, but only for a moment. "With all due respect, Counselor Price." Caprio stood up slowly. His chair scraped against the wood, quiet, but final. His next words came measured, steady, dangerous. "You just mocked an 80-year-old combat veteran. You questioned his intelligence, his memory, and his dignity. That is not clarification. That is cruelty." Price opened his mouth again. "I was assessing his cognitive state." Caprio's voice thundered. "Get out of my courtroom." Silence. No echo. No movement. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the heavy weight of disbelief. Price blinked. "Excuse me?" "You're excused," Caprio said sharply. "Removed from this case, effective immediately." "Bailiff, escort Counselor Price from the courtroom." For the first time, Price's composure cracked. "Your Honor, with respect, you can't just." "I absolutely can," Caprio cut in. "And I will. Because you're unfit to represent a man who served this nation when it needed him most." Price's face drained of color. He glanced down at Walter, who sat quietly gripping his cane. Caprio's tone softened, but only slightly. "Before you go, Counselor, let me educate you. Mr. Thompson served 2 tours in Korea. He was wounded in 1952, earned a Silver Star, and came home to rebuild his country. The confusion you mocked today may be the result of shrapnel that still rests near his skull." Price's mouth parted, but no words came. "Think about that," Caprio finished. "And when the Bar Association calls, tell them you were assessing rapport. Let's see how that sounds." He pointed to the door. "Leave." Price gathered his briefcase, eyes down. He left without another word. Caprio exhaled slowly and turned back to Walter. The courtroom felt colder, emptier now, but cleaner, too. Caprio sat back down, removing his glasses for a moment. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, the weariness of justice settling over him. Then he looked up. "Mr. Thompson," he said quietly, "I'm sorry for what just happened. You came here for help, and instead you were insulted. That's not what this courtroom stands for." Walter shook his head. "It's all right, Your Honor. I've been called worse." "Not in my courtroom you haven't," Caprio replied. He leaned forward, gentler now. "We'll find you another attorney, someone who understands what service means." Walter tried to speak but stopped. His throat tightened. Caprio gave him time. After a moment, Walter whispered, "I didn't want any trouble. I just wanted to make it right." Caprio nodded. "That's exactly what we'll do." He signaled to his clerk. "Please contact another public defender, someone senior." As they waited, Caprio looked down again at the file. The paperwork told a simple story: expired registration, hospital stay, missed notice. But life was never as simple as paperwork. He thought of his own father, an immigrant who taught him respect was the first law a man should live by. That memory lingered as the next door opened. 20 minutes later, a woman in her 50s entered, attorney Janet Russo. No expensive suit, no arrogance. Just quiet confidence and compassion. She approached Walter with a gentle smile. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Janet Russo. It's an honor to meet you, sir." Walter straightened a little. "Thank you, ma'am." They shook hands. Hers was firm, his was trembling. Russo turned to the judge. "Your Honor, may I have a few minutes to review his case?" "Of course," Caprio said. As she flipped through the documents, her expression remained calm. Then she looked up. "Mr. Thompson, may I ask about your service?" Walter hesitated, then nodded. U.S. Army, 1950 to 1953. 1st Cavalry Division. Wounded near Pork Chop Hill. Russo's eyes softened. "My father served in that same division. He never stopped talking about the courage of men like you." Walter blinked hard. "He made it back?" "He did. Because men like you covered their retreat." Caprio watched quietly. For the first time that morning, Walter smiled, a small, fragile thing, but real. Russo reviewed the hospital records, the deployment papers showing Walter's daughter serving overseas, the renewal forms he had tried to complete. Then she turned to the bench. "Your Honor, Mr. Thompson's failure to appear was not intentional. He was hospitalized at the VA Medical Center during the notice period. His daughter, who assists him, was overseas. He attempted to renew his registration but couldn't finish due to his hospitalization." Caprio nodded. "Do you have supporting documentation?" Russo handed over the folder. "Yes, sir. Medical records and verification from the VA." The judge read silently for several seconds. The sound of the paper turning was the only thing in the room. When he looked up, his eyes were clear. "Ms. Russo, what are you requesting?" "Dismissal of both charges, Your Honor." Caprio nodded once. "So ordered." He closed the file and looked directly at Walter. "Mr. Thompson, you owe nothing. No fines, no fees. And I'm issuing a standing order. If you receive any legal notice you don't understand, call this court directly. We'll help you." Walter blinked in disbelief. "Your Honor, I don't know what to say." Caprio smiled faintly. "Just promise me you'll call if you ever need help. That's all I ask." For a long moment, the courtroom stayed completely still. No one spoke. Not the clerk, not the bailiff, not the quiet observers sitting in the back row. Everyone just watched the old man standing there, holding his cane, tears collecting in the corners of his eyes. Then, softly, someone began to clap. It started with one pair of hands, then two, then the entire courtroom rose in quiet, respectful applause. Not for the judge. Not for the law. But for Walter Thompson, the man who had carried his country's weight through mud and snow 70 years ago and was still standing. Walter lowered his head humbly, his lips trembling. He had never been the center of applause before, at least, not since the day he came home from war to an empty train station and a folded flag for a friend who didn't make it. Judge Caprio waited for the sound to fade. When silence returned, he spoke softly, but his words carried power. "Mr. Thompson, that sound you heard isn't just clapping. That's gratitude. That's your city remembering what you did, maybe for the first time in a long time." Walter looked up, eyes glistening. "I never expected anyone to remember, Your Honor." The world moved on. My friends, they didn't. Caprio leaned forward. "Sometimes, Mr. Thompson, the world needs reminding." After court adjourned, Caprio asked Walter to wait a few minutes. He wanted to speak privately, away from the cameras and the crowd. Inside chambers, the atmosphere was calm, just the steady tick of a wall clock and the faint hum of rain against the window. Caprio poured 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Walter, who accepted it with a faint smile. "Thank you, Your Honor." Smells better than what they served in the army. Caprio chuckled. I wouldn't doubt it. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Caprio spoke. Mr. Thompson, I meant what I said. You don't owe this court a thing. But I want you to know something else. You reminded me today why I wear this robe. Walter tilted his head. How's that? Caprio set his coffee down. Sometimes justice becomes routine. Paperwork, procedure, schedules. But then someone like you walks in and reminds us what justice is for. It's not for punishment, it's for people. Walter nodded slowly. That's a rare way to see it, Your Honor. Caprio smiled faintly. It's the only way I can sleep at night. Walter's hand trembled slightly as he reached for a folded photo in his pocket. He slid it across the desk. It was an old black and white image, a group of young soldiers, arms around each other, laughing despite the mud. One of them, barely 20, was Walter. That's the only photo I have left, Walter said softly. Most of them didn't make it back. When you spoke up for me today, I felt like you spoke up for them too. Caprio swallowed hard, the emotion catching in his throat. He nodded respectfully. Then I consider that the greatest honor of my career. Later that week, the Rhode Island Bar Association received a formal complaint from the courthouse. It was filed under Judge Caprio's signature, Professional Misconduct, Counselor Damon Price. An investigation was opened immediately. Video footage confirmed everything: the dismissive tone, the mockery, the disrespect toward a veteran. 2 weeks later, Caprio received a letter in his chambers. It read: After review of the case, Counselor Damon Price has been suspended from practice for 60 days and ordered to attend a mandatory civility and ethics course. Caprio folded the letter and set it aside. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. Justice, when done right, isn't about revenge. It's about correction. Still, he hoped the young lawyer would learn something far more important than courtroom decorum: humility. That evening, he looked out his office window at the city lights of Providence flickering beneath the drizzle. So many people out there, he thought. So many stories crossing through his courtroom every day. And among them, once in a while, someone like Walter Thompson. Someone who reminded him why compassion was more powerful than law itself. 3 months later, Judge Caprio was presiding over another morning docket when the clerk handed him a small envelope. No sender listed, Your Honor, she said. Caprio opened it. Inside was a single handwritten note. Dear Judge Caprio, I don't know if you remember me, Walter Thompson. I wanted to thank you again for your kindness. My daughter has come home safely. She watched the video of that day and cried when she saw what you did. I never told you, but after the war, I stopped believing in justice. Too many good men died while bad men got promoted. But after meeting you, I realized there are still good men in the world who fight for what's right, just without the uniform. God bless you, sir. Walter. Caprio set the note down gently. For a long while, he didn't speak. The courtroom moved on, names were called, cases resolved, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Finally, during a short recess, he walked outside into the courtyard. The air was cool and crisp. He sat on the same stone bench where he often ate lunch and just stared at the sky. He whispered softly to himself. Justice with compassion. Always. A few weeks later, a local journalist requested permission to air the footage of the courtroom exchange between Caprio, Walter, and Counselor Price. Caprio hesitated. He didn't like making a spectacle out of people's pain. But Walter gave his blessing. He said, if it makes one person treat a veteran better, then it's worth it. The segment aired on Caught in Providence. Overnight, it became one of the most watched moments in the show's history. Millions of viewers left comments. That judge gave me faith in humanity again. My grandfather served in Korea, thank you, Judge Caprio. Compassion is justice. But the comment that stood out the most came from an anonymous account. It read, I was that attorney. I'm sorry. I learned my lesson. No one ever confirmed if it was truly Damon Price, but Caprio hoped it was. A year later, during a Veterans Day ceremony in Providence, Judge Caprio was invited as an honorary guest. He attended quietly, without expecting anything special. Halfway through the ceremony, the announcer stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we honor a man who not only served his country but reminded this city what justice looks like." Caprio blinked, surprised. From the side stage, Walter Thompson appeared, walking slowly, but without his cane this time. He was wearing a freshly pressed blazer, his medals pinned neatly over his heart. He walked up to the podium and said, "I used to think people forgot about men like me. But this man, Judge Frank Caprio, proved that decency never goes out of style." The crowd applauded. Caprio stood there, humbled, emotional. Walter turned to him and smiled. "Your Honor, I can never repay what you did. But I want you to have this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, weathered military patch, the emblem of the 1st Cavalry Division. "This was on my shoulder in Korea," Walter said softly. "It kept me alive when I was scared. Now I wanted to remind you, keep fighting the good fight." Caprio took the patch with trembling hands. "I'll treasure it, Mr. Thompson. Always." They embraced as the audience rose to their feet. Two generations, one who fought for freedom, another who fought for fairness, meeting in the middle of gratitude. Later that night, back in his office, Caprio placed the patch inside a small glass frame beside a photo of his own father. He sat down, leaned back in his chair, and whispered quietly, "Every case is a life. Every life deserves respect. And sometimes, the law needs a little heart to make it truly just." He looked out the window again. Providence glowed beneath the night sky, a city still imperfect, still learning, still human. In that moment, Judge Frank Caprio knew one thing for certain. The law could command obedience, but only compassion could inspire change. And that, he thought, was the real verdict of his career. In a world where respect often gets lost in the noise, one judge reminded us that true justice begins with empathy. Judge Frank Caprio didn't just defend a veteran that day, he defended humanity itself. And that's why millions call him not just Your Honor, but our honor.